Urban Elf, it feels like it's been a long time. I hope you've been well. I need to get something perfectly clear with you. My attempt to refute your argument had everything to do with the isolation and demonstration of an invalid modus tollens that was necessary for you to arrive at conclusion 2. In text comments, you conceded to me that that demonstration was accurate when you said, okay, I see your point about premise 3. Premise 3 was what you used in that incorrect, invalid modus tollens that had you arrive at your conclusion 2. Without that modus tollens, we cannot arrive at your conclusion 2. Now this is where things get messy. Your conclusion 2 is necessary in your conclusion 4. Without 2, we don't get 4. Your conclusion 4 is necessary in conclusion 5. So without 4, we can't get 5. Without 2, no 4. No 4, no 5. No 5, no argument. Because your conclusion 5 is that God doesn't exist. When you conceded that to me, I figured that we were on the same page to believe the argument was refuted. If you do not believe it has been, we need to backpedal, and I'd be happy to readdress that issue with you. Having said all that, and if we're clear on all that, then I'd be happy to look at any other part of your argument and look for potential errors or whatever you want me to look for. But realize that I consider the argument refuted because you used an invalid modus tollens to arrive at your conclusion 2, and your conclusion 2 is ultimately necessary for you to arrive at your last conclusion, that God doesn't exist. But you asked me to either accept or reject your premise 1. So having said all of that, I'd be happy to look at any other part, like I said, of your argument. You asked me to look at premise 1. Let's look at premise 1. I reject your premise 1. Here's why. I want to start here with a concession on my part, a little bit of a consolation prize. And that is that I was wrong in a particular critique that I made of particular aspects of your argument. I want to be very clear that this error has no bearing on my refutation of your modus tollens that was necessary for your conclusion 2. Okay? But it did have bearing on other critiques I had on other aspects of your argument, in particular, your premise 1. And that is that I was wrong in claiming that if-then statements cannot be premises. That was wrong of me. That was incorrect. That was wrong. I don't know how else to say it. It was wrong. So I submit myself, my concession. I expose my skin to the flames of yourself and your subscribers. They are delightful people. And with that, I would like to give you new meat to chew on, because even in light of that, I still have beef with your premise 1. See, every time we have an if-then statement as a premise, we see them in hypothetical syllogisms. But there's something very characteristic about this, though, that allows this if-then statement to function as a premise. And that is that between the if and the then clauses, there is a carried term. There is a common term. For example, if ducks have feathers and wings, then ducks are a kind of bird. The carried term is the word ducks. Ducks, feathers and wings, ducks, kind of bird. Another one. If rain falls from the sky, then rain gets things wet. Rain, fall from sky, rain, things get wet. Yours follows this pattern. If the word God refers to nothing, then the phrase God doesn't exist is true. Even if we were to clean up that second part, and if you would concede to me that a statement claiming that a statement that says something isn't true is equivalent to simply saying that something isn't true or that something doesn't exist, which is to say, the statement God doesn't exist is true is equivalent to claiming that God doesn't exist and simply saying God doesn't exist as a simple declarative phrase, then it would read, if the word God refers to nothing, then God doesn't exist. But again, there is no carried term, because here we're talking about the word God, and here we're talking about the actual ontological manifestation of something that atheists don't believe exists. If we use the original term you gave us, then we would just carry the term the word God. The word God refers to nothing. The word God doesn't exist. No one's going to claim that the word God doesn't exist. We all concede that. What do we have left? We have an if-then statement that does not function, as a premise does, as a hypothetical premise does, in an if-then statement, when all such statements have a carried term between the if and the then clause. It is for that reason I reject your first premise. And until you give me a premise, until you give me an if-then statement that has a carried term between the if and the then clauses, I will continue to reject it on those terms. Take care.